Hello and welcome. My name's Angie Holden and I'm the blogger behind The Country Chic Cottage. Today we're going to talk about laser test grids and testing your laser settings. So how do you find the right settings on your laser for any material that you want to cut, engrave, or score? Depending on what laser you have, the instructions will be a little bit different. So I am going to cover the instructions in the software for xTool, Wecreat, as well as Glowforge lasers. Now, if you have a different laser or you use a different program, the instructions might be slightly different, but still the use of laser test grids can help you save material as well as time and get your settings just right the first time. So no more wasting material trying settings over and over and over again. Just make your laser test grid and you'll know exactly what settings that you want to make for whatever material you're cutting or whatever object maybe you're engraving. Now for my example pieces here, I cut laser test grids out of wood. Obviously I had to waste just a small amount of wood to make these. If you are engraving, say, tumblers, you would need to basically scrap an entire tumbler to make your laser test grid on that tumbler. So you would need to order an extra tumbler in order to make laser test grids on it. However, it can still save you material. If you have ever been very frustrated by a tumbler, you can't get those engraved settings exactly right to where it just removes the material and it looks really, really great, a laser test grid can really save you. So adding that laser test grid to the side of one tumbler, scrapping it completely, and just seeing what the variety of settings will do on the tumbler will help you to dial in the exact settings that you need to get those perfect tumblers that you are looking for. So let's dive in and take a closer look at these laser test grids and talk about exactly what they are. Here are some examples of laser test grids. This one is an engraving test grid and this one is a cutting test grid. Now these were done on my Glowforge Spark, but a similar test grid could be made on any laser and any material. So any material that you want to cut, engrave, score, you can set up a test grid and get an idea of what things are going to look like. And then I can say that maybe this square looks the best to me and is the look that I want, that I would need my settings to be 150 and 7. Similarly on this one, some of these didn't even cut through and this was a cutting test grid. So I would want the one that cuts through the best. And in this example, I put a mask over the material, but maybe I didn't want to and I would check the char around the cut and pick the one that looked the best. You can score notes on settings or what the machine is or what the material is around the outside, and then you can keep these. And anytime I cut or engrave this material, I can reference these to see what I want to use for my settings to get exactly the look I want on my material. These are a huge saver of material as well as time when you are doing laser cutting. So I'm going to show you how to make these in Glowforge software, xTool, as well as Wecreat software. First, within the Wecreat software, I'm going to click New Project, and then I'm going to draw a rectangle. So you can draw a small rectangle here. Go ahead and set your settings. So I'm going to set this as an engraving. I'm going to click over here. I'm going to set my material to whatever I want it to be. Then I can pick that rectangle, pull down where it says Array, and click Material Testing Array. Now I can set up everything I want on this material testing array. So power, minimum of 10, maximum of 100. I could set these to whatever I wanted to, as well as the speed from 10 to 600. Number of columns and rows, I could change that up, and the spacing. So let's say I wanted 200 for my minimum power. It's going to set that as my minimum and change the intervals on the testing array. And that's all there is to making a laser test grid within the Wecreat software. We'll just click confirm. And our array is ready. Now, if you want to change the text, maybe you want to make some more notes, we're going to right click and ungroup. And then I'm going to click this top and I can say Wecreat. I could put the name of the material. I could put different things in the notes at the top and actually score or engrave those on the surface. Now, the only thing about the Wecreat test grids, it has a line engrave around the outside. If you wanted similar to what I showed you before where you have a little piece that you cut out, you would want to add another rectangle that is a cut rectangle around the outside. But otherwise, this is all there is you need to do to create that laser test grid within the Wecreat software. So I did want to show you within the Wecreat software, you may not need to make your own test grid. So I can click material and let's just say I pick something. I'm going to pick a green acrylic. You can actually see a test grid that they have made in the corner. So with the laser that you're using, this is some green acrylic and they have made a test grid. This can often give you a good place to start without you needing to make the test grid yourself for your settings. So you might try this, however settings may vary depending on the brand of acrylic that you use. In xTool Creative Space, we're going to click New Project. Then once again, I'm going to draw a rectangle or square. I'm going to go ahead and set that to engraving, and I could even add some settings here if I wanted to. Then we'll pick that rectangle, click the applications, and click Material Test Array. Similar to the software we just looked at for Wecreat, you can change the power. So here, 100 is the max, 10 is the minimum. For power, for speed, 10 is the minimum, 600 is the max. And for any of these, I can just change one place and it will change it on my array over here. And then you can alter the number of rows and columns as well as the spacing and click OK. And then you can see it makes a test array for me with intervals. Again, I can ungroup this if I want to change what this says at all. This is fine. If I want to make any additional notes that will be scored or engraved into the surface. And once again, it does not have a box around the outside. So you can use these laser test grids on any surface, including engraving on a tumbler or something like that. So it doesn't always put the cut around the outside edge. So you would need to add another rectangle as a cut line around the outside edge if you wanted just little pieces that you could keep. Then once again, you might not need to make your own test grids. So if I click over here to Material and I click Material Easy Set Library, I could pick one of these materials. So let's say I pick this 3mm walnut MDF board. You can see that there's already a test grid here that sort of tells me what each of these will look like. It tells me where they get the preferred settings. However, if I wanted a different look, I could change my settings. And up here, if I click Engrave, that will load a different test grid. So you may not actually have to make the test grids with your xTool. You can go by these test grids that they already have loaded. Glowforge is definitely the hardest place to make a laser test grid. You might buy a file off of Etsy or something like that to make this a little bit easier, but I'm going to show you how to create one. So we're going to click Create a Blank Design, and I like to insert shapes, so I'm going to insert a rectangle. I'm going to make it pretty small, and then I'm going to enter my settings for just this rectangle. So I'm going to do an engrave. And one trick is to pick something similar to what you want to cut. So these are for Glowforge proof grade materials, and maybe I have something similar to light basswood plywood. So I might click that, then click this engrave, and then I can actually see the settings for SD graphic, and it's 100 speed, 9 power, and 405 lines per inch. So I can use that as a starting point for my laser test grid. So then I can click this, and maybe the first one I want to make the same as what Glowforge recommends for their material. And then to save this custom setting, do not click the back button, just click over here somewhere. And then we want to copy this, and then right click and put paste as a new step. And then we can put it over here to the side. And for this one, so if this one is 100, maybe I want this one to be 125. Same power, same lines per inch. And then again, click over here to save that. You would just keep adding these rectangles. Then you would use the text tool to add text at the top for what it is, as well as text for your columns and rows. So here are my example laser test grids. So these are all made within the Glowforge software, and I added score lines for some notes at the top, for the column and the row headers. And then each of these is set to a different setting. This one for engraving and this one for cutting. And then in my notes, for example, I put the 405 lines per inch because that might be something I want to test in the future as to how many lines per inch works best for my material. So I went ahead and put that in the notes here. So as you can see, it is more difficult to make these within the Glowforge software. It gets a bit confusing with all these layers, figuring out which one is which. What I did was hover over each one so I could see where it was at and make sure that my settings were correct. And within the Glowforge software, as far as the materials, there are no laser test grids already loaded that I'm aware of. So now you've seen how to make these in xTool Creative Space, the Wecreat software, as well as the Glowforge software. Now Glowforge is definitely the most difficult for making laser test grids and finding those settings, especially for material that is non-proof grade. I feel like xTool and Wecreat do a really great job of making it super simple to get that material testing array set up, and then all you have to do is click process and process it on whatever material. So again, my example was a piece of wood. However, you can use this on the side of a tumbler. You can use it on whatever type of material you're engraving. Now, if you are doing something very expensive, if the blank itself is very expensive, you might be like, I do not want to scrap one. I would find a material that is similar, however, maybe not as expensive. And it would at least give you a very good starting point. With those expensive blanks, I'm always super nervous to hit that button on my laser and get it to start going because I do not want to ruin that very expensive blank. So getting a material that's similar, putting a laser test grid on it, will at least help you to dial in the best possible settings that you can before putting that expensive blank in your laser. So hopefully this helps you stop wasting your material as well as your time when you're laser crafting. If you have any questions about anything we covered, drop down in the comment section, ask away. If you like this video and it helped you, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, head on over to our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. We have videos just like this one every single week, and trust me, you don't want to miss any of those. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.